to say welcome and thank you for all coming here today. It's a little warm out for you guys, isn't it? Yes. So you know, I'm from South Florida, and this jacket is actually keeping me warm here today. Could you imagine that? All right. My name is Stuart Schlossman, president and founder of MS Views and News, and I too have multiple sclerosis. All right. Going forward, this program today, we want to thank Teva Neuroscience for providing us the funding to do today's program. And I hope that you all thank them, thank me, and them, all right? Because we can't do these programs without the help of the pharmaceutical industry, who really do want you all to learn more about MS. It doesn't help them or anybody else if you are not understanding everything that is going on with you, and whether it's disease progression or not, and how you can better yourselves with exercise or with just clearly thinking better and knowing about the disease. So they want to make sure that all of the pharmaceutical industries work, or companies work with MS Views and News, and so that's why we are doing so many programs. Before we begin with the actual program, we ask support group leaders all the time, wherever we do programs, to come on up and speak for 90 seconds about their group. So that way you know, because maybe you have never been to a support group, and maybe you've been to support groups, but maybe you want to know about another support group in the area. So we're going to ask you to come that way. Very good. And then this way. All right. And first up, we have Charla, and she's going to speak for 90 seconds.
Okay. I hope you have your little timer going for me.
Yes.
Okay. My name is Charla Swanson. I am the support group leader out of Elgin, Illinois. And we have a good group. We have a lot of men in our support group, and which I found out is very rare. But we meet every 3 months instead of monthly or weekly, because we find that the people who have trouble going out in the heat then don't have to come out in July and August. And if you have trouble with the cold, you don't have to come out in January and February. So it works good for us, plus nobody gets bored going, oh my goodness, I got to go to another meeting. So this month at our meeting, we will be having I guess you could say a martial arts expert to show my group how you can defend yourself even if you're in a walker, a wheelchair, a scooter, doesn't matter. So it's something for other groups to ask their support leaders about. Okay? Right. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Linda, where's Linda? Come on up, Linda. You know, it's not that I don't know where people are sitting, but these lights are really bright and very warm. You wouldn't know it until you come up here.
Will I get a suntan?
Maybe. Got to stand outside, though.
Hi, I'm Linda Vidic, and I run the Forest Park Support Group for MS. I've had MS for going on 43 years. My support group is small. It's very friendly, very informative. We meet every month except July and August, like Charlotte was saying. And we do meet in the wintertime. But a lot of times in the winter, everybody is sort of local so they can get there. They also use PACE. They use different companies where they can get free rides. Maybe their town offers it. Their community centers will also offer rides to certain people to so many miles. And our support group is very positive, and we're one of the longest running ones. It's the first one I ever went to in '74. That's when I was diagnosed. And I tell you, being a support group leader is the best thing, because I feel so good. And there's so many people here that I know that don't come to my group that I see every once in a while, and it's great to talk to you. Thank you.
Next we have Bartira. I've known Bartira a very long time. I don't know if that's good or bad, but I know Bartira a long time.
It's bad. Hi, my name is Bertida. Like he says, I know him for a long time. And I have a support group we meet at Alexian Brother, the first Thursday of the month. They call More Sunshine Support Group. We are a very positive, happy group, and I see several people from my group here. And most of the time, we have speakers like Dr. Kazamakis, Dr. McCoy, Javed, Dr. Khatri, Amy Ross. It's very informative. And if you want more information and come and join us, let me know. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, next up, the reason for this program today is we had gotten a grant to a program called The Land of MS, fostering effective communication with the healthcare provider. And although I gave something away a little while ago about the communication tool, Dr. Steingo will go into that probably even more so. So we wanted to do something very different for your community and not talk about all the standard whatevers that I was even mentioning earlier, and not using a local physician who probably many of you have either heard most of the neurologists or the nurse practitioners in the area. And we wanted to bring you a special treat because this person is very valuable in my life, and I know that he'd be very valuable in your lives as well. And with that, I want to introduce Dr. Brian Steingo from South Florida, and that means you have to come forward, yes. You've done this a few times. You should know this already. Great. So everybody, thank Dr. Steingo for coming in today.
Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you for having Florida weather available for me. Not quite as humid, but you get the right 92 degrees. It's just about right for me. So I'm going to talk to you about this idea that I had, and I started this program many years ago with these ideas, and they continue to evolve. If you have new ideas or anything you would like us to change, as Stuart said, when you fill in stuff, it's very valuable to us when people give input. But this is called the Land of MS. And when I started this, I was trying to think of a name, the world of MS. And every name I looked up on the internet, somebody had taken it. But nobody had the Land of MS. And so I thought to myself, when you have MS, this is a new chapter in your life. It can be a chapter where you get lots of support and other things, and we're going to talk about those. But it is a new chapter. And so the one phrase nobody had come up with was the Land of MS. And so we're going to talk about the Land of MS. In my practice in South Florida, I only treat people with MS. I don't do any other kind of neurology. I just see people with MS. We have a large practice. We do all the things you need to do for treating people with MS, including research. People often ask me why I'm interested in MS. There's no reason, actually. My mother did have neurological problems, but not MS. The irony of it is that now there's MS in my family. My daughter-in-law has two relatives, an uncle and an aunt, who have MS. So all of a sudden I acquired some MS in my family. But this is some of the items you could talk to. So when you go into the Land of MS, there's many different things that you can talk about. Starting out right from the beginning about how the MS is diagnosed, how you treat MS, whether you're treating the relapse or the drugs that you're using, and then this building that you see over there called the Symptom Tower. Why do we call it the Symptom Tower? How many symptoms of MS are there? It's a tower, it's a skyscraper, it's the CS Tower, whatever you call it now. It's because there's so many symptoms that we could talk about. Or we could talk about MS research, or the support that you get, and the support of MS extends. Here's part of it, meeting people, coming to meetings like this, MS Society support groups, all the support groups, that's part of support. And that most important chapter that I'm definitely going to spend some time on, self-help. What you do for yourself, how important is that in managing your MS? So each one of these we could spend a whole afternoon talking about. But we're going to just talk about certain aspects as we go along with this. A little introduction. You've seen this before. What are the initial symptoms of MS? Why is it hard to diagnose MS? It's not easy to diagnose MS. It's much easier than it used to be 30 years ago, because 30 years ago we had no MRI scans. And so it's hard to diagnose MS because there is no actual blood test for MS. You can diagnose Lyme disease, you can diagnose lupus, you can diagnose Sjögren's disease with blood tests, but there is no actual blood test for MS. And so what you have to think about are what are the symptoms, are these the right kind of symptoms, then look at the MRI scans, and then make sure that it's nothing else. So here are some of the commoner symptoms. We're not going to spend a lot of time about symptoms, but you can see we all know optic neuritis, loss of balance, dizziness, weakness, double vision, bladder and bowel problems, pain and sensory loss, numbness and tingling. And I mentioned on this page, you'll see one of the symptoms we'll spend a little more time talking about, which is pain. And there was a time for some of you who've had MS for a long time that you might recall they said pain does not happen in MS. And some of you recall those days when they said MS doesn't cause pain, which of course we know is not true. And I broke down the symptoms. Of course, this stuff, as you can see, is being recorded. It's all going to be there, archived on the internet, so I'm not going to go into detail about the symptoms. But there could be visual symptoms or motor symptoms. weakness, spasticity, tremors, numbness, tingling, fatigue, trouble walking, memory problems, depression, anxiety, bladder problems, bowel problems, sexual dysfunction. So look at all the problems. That's why we have a symptom tower, because there are so many problems. And we could take each one of these and say, how do we manage a bladder problem? How do we manage fatigue? Each one of these we could spend an hour talking about. And if you have questions about them, we might spend a few minutes talking about them. But I want to also point out this important section over here, the invisible symptoms of MS, as differentiated from the symptoms that are obvious when you see someone having trouble walking or with a speech problem. These are the invisible symptoms, and that's the definition that the MS Society came up with, is that when people look at you sometimes, they might think you're looking great. And so the MS Society actually has a booklet that many of you have seen. Remember that booklet? It's called But You Look So Good. Have some of you seen that? It's excellent. And whenever I see people, I say, take this, show your family members, show other people, because when they see you and look at you and you say, I'm tired, what's their response? You're lazy? Yeah. How many lazy people are there here? Put up your hands. Are you lazy? You're not trying hard enough. It's all in your head. And ironically, that's where it is. Actually, it is in the head, but in a different way. So invisible symptoms of MS are very important symptoms, and these are some of them that are not so obvious on the outside to the person looking in at you, maybe, and judging you, because we do have a judgmental society. I was most surprised on the news last night. I saw something good. Imagine that. I saw somebody in a subway in New York fell off the rails and somebody picked them up. Did any of you see that? I said, good news on the TV, and it's unusual. But these are symptoms you can't see. Fatigue. How do you explain MS fatigue? It's not easy. You look good. How do you explain pain? Or cognitive problems. Short-term memory impairment, difficulty with all the other cognitive problems, multitasking, processing, all these things, slowing down, not quite who you used to be. How do you explain those to people that don't have them? Not easy. They're the invisible symptoms, which are hugely important symptoms. And so what I've done with you so far is talk to you about all the primary symptoms of MS. The primary symptoms of MS mean the symptoms that are directly due to those lesions that you see in the brain. When you look at the brain scan, you see plaques or lesions or white spots, whatever name you're comfortable giving them. And those are the direct primary symptoms of MS, directly due to the spots. But now, because you've got these spots and all these problems, guess what else happens to you? Now you don't walk well. And so you fall. And you have injuries, and urinary tract infections, and anxiety and depression, and your daily activities change. These are the so-called secondary symptoms. All your primary symptoms cause all these things to happen, and we must deal with these too. So we must not neglect any of these symptoms. And then these lead to something even worse, the tertiary symptoms of MS. Because you've got all those other problems, look what happens. You may lose your job. You're unemployed, you're young. You're in your peak earning years and you cannot work anymore. And this leads to family stress. The divorce rate in MS is considerable, higher than any other disease. Social isolation, loss of independence, loss of self-esteem. And these are problems we need to deal with. And we can help these problems, but someone has to identify them, and then someone has to be open to talk about them. If we talk about these problems, then we're able to do much better. So this is the set of symptoms I want to give you the background. The primary, the secondary, and the tertiary, all these important symptoms that we have to deal with day to day in the clinic. Now, you know what, once we diagnose MS, there's different kinds of MS. Let me see one thing. Okay, I want to leave it up in this format. So we used to say that the commonest type of MS is relapsing and remitting MS. We still know that, that's still true. And sometimes people can have their very first episode, and we know they're going to eventually develop MS, and we call this over here the clinically isolated syndrome, which means your very first episode. We might say this is an episode that indicates that you're going to have MS, but we can't diagnose it yet, but we pretty much treat it the same way. And then you can have progressive MS. And progressive MS can occur in one of two ways. Either it can progress right from the beginning. Someone doesn't really have relapses. They start to progress from the onset, or they can have relapsing first and then start to progress, and we call that secondary progressive. So we're kind of starting to think a little bit about MS as two types, maybe going forward more the relapsing types of MS and progressive types of MS. Our thinking is evolving kind of into that direction. So we're going to go back now, and this is a summary of the very first slide I show you, just in a table format. You have MS, we make a diagnosis, we speak about treating the relapse or relapses, we manage your disease, we call those DMTs or disease management therapies, we manage your symptoms, we must speak about self-management, what you do for yourself, and a summary. And so I've listed over here the most important step, which I think is a hugely important step in improving your MS. Now, I don't know how often you see a neurologist. It might be every 3 months, it could be every 6 months, it could be once a year. But it's a visit that you need to make the most of. You need to capitalize on that visit. And there are certain ways that you do that. That visit should not be a waste of time. Everything should be organized for that visit. That, to me, is the most important thing, how important that visit is. So you will see in a minute, we're going to summarize this on that tool that kind of Stuart popped up earlier. We want to know why you're there for the visit. What is your main complaint? It might be just your annual checkup. You're doing well. It might be your main complaint. Or it might be a new symptom, a new bladder problem. Any of the symptoms we listed before, any of those could be a new complaint. And any other neurological symptoms that you might have. For example, you might have migraine, other neurological symptoms. All of these are things we're going to ask questions about. And then we want to know about your medications and supplements, all of them. And you'll see those on the tool. Social facts, psychological facts. I'm under stress. I'm not working anymore. I'm having stress at work. My son is on drugs. These are stories we hear every day in the office. Different problems to deal with. Your general health is important. I need to know about that. Are you diabetic? Do you have high blood pressure? Do you have any other medical problems? High cholesterol? We need to know about those. And then there's a section for questions. And then there's a summary. Again, you see I put this word summary. What does summary mean? I'll talk to you about it now and maybe a little bit later again. Summary means that at the end of my visit with my patients, I say to them, now let's go over, let's summarize what we spoke about today so I know we're on the same page. And we'll talk some more about that going forward. This probably, I don't know if you can see that. You probably don't see that very well. It's probably quite small, especially there in the corner. Again, this is going to be online. So this is there are 2 sheets of paper. Did they give you do you have copies of these? Oh, okay, you got it in front of you then, good. So here, this is exactly to me the key thing about making this visit valuable, that you fill this in. So most people will take, at their visit, when they're done with their visit, they'll take one of these home. There is another way you could do this, and that is you can go online to MS Views and News and just print it out and fill it in. So now you bring this into the office with you, filled in, spend time. It's your time, it's my time. It makes our interaction valuable if you take the time, an extra few minutes to fill this in. So fill this in. Some basic stuff on top, what's your pharmacy, changes like that. Is that important? That's very important because we often are going to send in medications electronically. And so someone has their visit and they say, well, can you refill my, whatever, Ditropan, my bladder medication? Okay. I go right in front of them. I can type it in and it says, I say, is your pharmacy CVS? No, it changed to Walgreens. Well, already now we're wasting time now because I can't do that. It's not entered. And if you ask me to enter Walgreens instead of CVS, I have no clue. None. That's my medical assistant can do that. So now we've got to go up to her and she's got to enter another pharmacy. If you have a new pharmacy, just let us know about that. Put it in. Just put in a phone number, address, whatever it is. It saves time. Now, why are you here today? So that's question 2. Why are you here today? It's my annual visit. I'm having bladder problems. I need my forms filled in. Whatever it is, you put it in there. I look at this. I know immediately what we're going to be dealing with. And then over here are all your a bunch of your neurological symptoms are all listed over here. So I can look at this and get a good idea of what we're going to be talking about. This says list all medications and supplements. And it says all. I put in capital so people know about this. List all medications and supplements. And I wish I had $1 for every time somebody didn't follow that. Because then I probably wouldn't have to be here. Could probably be on the beach or something. It's very important that we know everything you're on. Drugs interact with each other. And often, it's not the drugs that I've prescribed that interact, but drugs somebody's on from someone else that might be even interacting. An antidepressant and a bladder medication. Other medications. I will need to know about all your medications and all your supplements. That means I need to know about your vitamin D and your B12 and your CoQ10. Everything. And one of the things that doesn't help me is when you write over here, same. Same. What does same mean? Same. So now what do I have to do? Now I have to go into somewhere into my electronic medical record and look over the medication and say, are you still on this and this and this and this and so on? It's wasting time again. Tell me what you're on. Let me have a look and I know what you're on. There is no same. Have you ever been to Walgreens and asked them for same? Have you tried that? I did. I go to Walgreens and say, can I have same? I said, what? About to call 911. They said, we never heard of the same. How about unchanged? Have you heard of unchanged? I tried that one too. Went to Walgreens and said, have you got unchanged? No, we don't have unchanged. So you must fill this. It's very important that we can see what you're on. And there's a few other things when your MRIs and last lab work and all those things are very helpful to us, if you remember them. And then on top here are some psychosocial types of factors. Are you still smoking? What is the effect of smoking on MS? And I'm not talking about smoking on your general health. I'm not talking about whether it causes lung cancer or emphysema or heart disease. I'm talking what is the effect of smoking on MS? It's not good. I need to know that you're smoking so I can at least try and give you some good advice. All these things are important things we need to know about. Are you still working, any drugs? Do you exercise? These are all very important factors. And then some psychological factors. How happy are you? Do you have a lot of stress? Can we help you in any way? Do I need to refer you to a social worker? Because we have them available. And I can call them. We call right away and say, okay, I have someone who needs some help. And they can step in and help. Don't ignore it. Tell me about them. And then review of symptoms. And some of these symptoms over here are overlapping with the prior page of the MS symptoms, such as the bladder symptoms. You can see a whole section there on bladder symptoms and mental health symptoms, confusion, anxiety, depression, all the cognitive problems. The next is the bladder problems, bowel control problems, all very, very real problems for MS. Eye problems. MS can affect the eyes in several different ways, all these different things. And then some general health problems with some overlap with MS. So it's important to address all these things. So I think this communication tool is the link to making your visit successful and for your physician and you to be on the same page so we can do the best with that visit, whether it's half an hour or 40 minutes or whatever it is. It's very important that you fill in some form. And your own neurologist may have different forms that are similar to this, but to me this is a concise 2 pages that really brings a lot of value to your visit. So going on now and saying, how do you decide? This is a common question now. Someone's been in, we made the diagnosis of MS, and we're trying to decide now what drug should you pick. How do you pick the drug? And so going forward, what we're trying to do is get into a time of what we call, you're going to hear more about these phrases, personalized medicine or individualized medicine, which means we're trying to pick the drug that's best for you, what suits you best. Your lifestyle, your other diseases, your concerns, what's most important to you. So that's called individualized or personalized medicine. And so these are all the things that we have to think about. It's not a straightforward decision. Sometimes people will say to me, what would you pick? I'm saying, I could tell you what I would pick for me, but that doesn't mean that's right for you. You need to think about this. And these are all the things that you see in front of you that are things that we need to think about. So I never will pick a drug on the first visit. If I'm seeing someone new or someone who needs to switch a drug, I will not pick the drug on that visit. I'm going to say, I'm going to refer you, so I'm going to give you some information. We'll have some general discussion, and then you come back in 2 weeks when you've done some homework. And make some notes, write some things down, and come back in a couple of weeks, and then we'll go over all this stuff. This is a crucial decision. When you buy a new car, you don't just go in and buy it. Do you ever go to the very first dealer and just buy the car? And just think about, this is your health for life. This is a lifelong disease. We can't make a decision in 10 minutes. It's just not right. We need to think about it. So these are the things you think about. The top 3 are key ones. So that's safety, efficacy, and tolerability. So you might say, I want the drug that's been around a long time and it's got great safety. Or you might say, my disease is so active that efficacy is more important than safety. Or how much will I tolerate it? And then there's all kinds of other things. How effective is the drug in the trials? How do we monitor it? What kind of blood tests do we need? How often do we need to do blood tests? How convenient is it? What about the cost? The insurance company. We could sit for half an hour and discuss a drug, and the insurance company tells us, no, you have to choose something else. And then pregnancy issues. What age are you? Woman in childbearing age. All kinds of different concerns. So these are all the things that go into making a treatment decision. That's why it's not easy just to pick a drug for your MS. And here's the great news. How many different agents do we have now that we could pick for you? So if there's anybody here that had MS before 1993, if you appeared in my office in 1992 and said, I had MS, what would I be able to offer you? For your MS, pretty much nothing. Maybe chemo. And now look at that. We have 15, count the number, there are 15 agents. I'm not saying 15 different drugs, because as you'll see, there's several different forms of interferons. There are several different forms of Copaxone now. There are 3 forms of Copaxone. There was Copaxone 20 milligrams a day, and we had that for 20 years, since 1996. And then more recently, we had Copaxone 40 milligrams 3 times a week. And now we have a generic Copaxone. So we have 3 forms of Copaxone. We have multiple different interferons: beta-seron, Avonex, Rebuff, Plegridy, Extavia, multiple interferons. And then we have oral medications and infusions. And even up recently, within the last month, we have one new drug approved, which is this medication called Daclizumab or Zenbrita, that you see right over there. So we have 15 agents that we're going to pick for you, and we're going to look at how active your disease is and what the right medication for you is. It's a whole detailed kind of thing we could talk about, but that's what we have right now is 15 agents, and we're thinking we're going to have number 16 within the next 6 months, or approval within the next 6 months or so, and I'm not sure how I'm going to fit that in on here. I've got to make everything a bit smaller. That's a great feeling to have this slide up over here. Because when we did this, even if you go back even, say, 12 years ago, 2004, you can see you would have just had pretty much Tysabri was about to be approved. Everything else on the right side wasn't there. And so we've come a long way with our drugs with MS. And these drugs have considerably changed the course of MS. There is, to this day, unfortunately, still no cure. But we're trying to modify the disease, to lessen the severity of the disease. Now, not only are you taking your medications for your MS, but how many other medications could you be taking for your MS? Again, you don't have to look at this complex slide. It's meant to be complex. Because look at the number of medications that you could be taking for MS. You could be taking something for fatigue, or depression, or spasticity or pain, or bladder problems, or constipation, or dizziness, or cognitive problems, or for tremors, or for walking. There's a large number of medications. And now, what's the result of all this? We have to think about this very carefully, because that is called polypharmacy. We're giving you many medications. So not only am I giving you medications for your MS and for your MS symptoms, but you could also be seeing other physicians for other conditions. And look at the things that could happen. Think about the interactions. So it's very important, and this goes back to that slide I emphasized earlier about your medications. That's why it's important. Because think of the number of medications that you could be taking, and so therefore think of the number of interactions that could be going on. And they could happen. Now, sometimes the pharmacist will pick them up. But I'd like to preempt that. I would like to, if I know about them, kind of find something that might not work together before you even see the pharmacist. But there can be a lot of interactions. I want you to, this is an added reason why you need to record all your medications, because you're taking medications for your MS, for your MS symptoms, for other conditions. They add up. They interact. We need to know about that. That's called polypharmacy. Now, this section over here is a section that I think is very important. And this is the section now we're finished talking about me, what I do. So far, everything's about you come to my office, you tell me about your drugs, you tell me about your symptoms. I'm going to recommend these drugs for your MS. I'm going to recommend these drugs for your symptoms. I'm going to motivate you. I'm going to counsel you. I'm going to do these things. But this section is about what you do for yourself. So let me say that without this section, if you don't do this section, then the whole thing falls apart. Then the team doesn't work. Because in a way, in an analogy, I think I'm kind of the coach. I'm going to tell you, I'm going to send you the plays of what to do. But you're the quarterback. If you don't execute and you don't throw the ball right, you might be intercepted in the management of your MS. And so our teams in recent years, both the Miami Dolphins and the Chicago Bears, have not given us a lot of joy. So I don't know about the football analogy. Maybe I need a different analogy. But here is Team of Friends, things that you do for yourself. So this is an acronym I made up. And every few months I make a different acronym. But here's the acronym this time. Team of Friends. T, temperature management. That's something you do yourself. You manage the temperature. If you have to go outdoors, you get a cooling vest. Or you stay inside where it's air conditioned. If you have to exercise where it's comfortable, where it's air conditioned. Don't say it's too hot, therefore I can't exercise today. Don't make the excuse, rather find a reason to do it in a different comfortable location. How about expectations? So E could be expectations, or later on it could be exercise. Your expectations are very important. Now, when I tell you about a particular medication, I want you to understand what I expect this medication to do. I expect this medication will maybe prevent you from having relapses and slow down the progression of your disability, and maybe have some positive benefits on your MRI scans. This is what I want the medication to do, all these kind of things. So the expectations are very important. Now, I've seen people that come in and you see them 6 months later or a year later and they had a relapse, and you said, well, unfortunately, it seems like your medication is not working, and then they kind of admit that if you look down on that TEA adherence, they are not taking their medication. Why? They're saying, I don't think it's working anymore. How do you know? Because I'm not better. Well, the medication for your MS is not going to make you better. It's going to stop you from getting worse. The way we're going to make you better is by looking at all your symptoms and improving your symptoms and doing all the other things that you see over here, mental aspects, managing mental aspects. Things like depression, maybe we could throw in here some of the cognitive stuff as well. So cognitive stuff, teaching someone about multitasking and about processing and all those kind of mental activities, mental stimulation, as well as the very important item of managing depression. And then sleep problems. So all these things interact with each other. If you don't sleep well, how do you feel the next day? Fatigued. So you come into the office, and some of this will come up later, but I'll just talk about it now. You come in to the office, say, I'm very fatigued. So I'd say, okay, well, let's try some Provigil. That doesn't make sense, really, because why are you fatigued? I need to find out why you're fatigued. Maybe you're fatigued because your bladder is bothering you, and so you get up at night 5 times to go to the bathroom, and that's why you're fatigued. Or maybe you're fatigued because you've got pain and spasms. The pain and spasms are keeping you up at night. And if I can help your pain and spasms, you'll speak better, you'll sleep better, and then the next day, you might have less fatigue. So we need to look into the causes of why you're having the sleep disturbance. And by the way, sleep apnea is not uncommon in people with MS, so if someone is snoring as well, we need to evaluate that too. Of course, outlook is important for all chronic diseases, MS, cancer, any chronic disease. Outlook is important, so we try and tell people, try and have a positive outlook and try and surround yourself with positive people. Fatigue we kind of spoke about already, and food. What about your diet? Is diet important? It's somewhat controversial. Some people think it's more important than other people. You know, that we'll talk a little more about diet as we go along. Relationships, having good relationships and interactions with people. It's all part of the same thing. Support groups. Exercise. I cannot stress enough the importance of exercise. And physical exercise not only is good for you physically, but also important for you mentally. Physical exercise has great mental benefits, probably as much mental benefit as mental exercise itself. And then keeping up with the news, which is what many of you do, and that is like from MS Views and News or the National MS Society or whatever source you have, but keeping up to date with news, asking questions when you read about new things. I put a separate heading of D. Although we've spoken higher up about food and nutrition, vitamin D is so important, I believe, and others, that I put it as a separate heading. I stress vitamin D. And then, of course, we spoke briefly about smoking before. So these are all the things you do for yourself. This is what you do. This is your role in maintaining your health, to do these things. And some of them should be quite automatic, but they're very important. If you do all these things, if I get you on the right drug and we manage your symptoms and you do all these things, it's going to make your MS a lot better than without them. I'm going to pick on some of those symptoms. We've already spoken about this already a little bit, some of these, which is firstly fatigue, which of course are very difficult to describe. How do you describe fatigue, MS fatigue? We're not talking about fatigue because you're exhausted because you were shopping all day or playing outdoors all day or something. This is this lack of energy, physical or mental, that interferes with your activities. And it's hard to explain it. And I wrote there at the bottom, this is not laziness. This is not lack of motivation. This is not psychological. Now you might have those too. If you might have fatigue from MS and still have lack of motivation. I mean, you could have all of these too. But we must assume that you have MS fatigue. And in this situation, I have that MS booklet in my office. And everybody should get that booklet. But you look so good. Because it's something for people to give to their family members who may not understand, or their co-workers, or their friends. Just read this and understand about this condition. Maybe your attitude toward me will change a little bit. And so the primary MS fatigue, again, is MS fatigue that's directly due to your MS. So that's directly due to your MS. There's no other cause for it. And if that's what it comes out to be, when we evaluate you and say you've got primary MS fatigue, we treat that. And you might have both, primary and secondary. And secondary MS fatigue is due to all the other things that I spoke about that you're able to modify. So it might be because you're weak. So do some exercise, start to improve your strength. You are deconditioned. How many people are out of condition and deconditioned? Or sleep, or depression, or bladder problems, or heat sensitivity, or medication side effects. A lot of medications can make you feel fatigued and have other side effects. Dizziness, depression. Medications can have a lot of side effects. So if you have a new side effect, I need to say, have you started a new medication as well? And then other medical conditions that can cause you to be fatigued, like thyroid disease. How common is thyroid disease in MS? Answer, it's common. So we need to be looking at all these things when we're thinking about managing and thinking about your fatigue. Here are some of the medications we use. Amantadine's been around a long time. Provigil, all these are stimulants essentially. Provigil, Nuvigil, Ritalin, these are stimulant medications. We talk about them and pick what's right for you. But here's something about sleep and MS. So they did a study, someone did a study on sleep and MS and said that about 1/5 of MS patients, 20%, have OSA, which stands for obstructive sleep apnea. And this is a questionnaire over there. You can see that questionnaire. It's called the Stop Bang questionnaire. You can look at this, but it's all going to be available for you in the video. But this is where STOP comes from. S-T-O-P was for pressure. Stop Bang, B-A-N-G. These are all factors that make you at risk for having apnea. So if someone is snoring and they're tired during the day, if they have actual apnea, if their blood pressure is high, if their BMI is high, if they're overweight, if their neck circumference is large, male patients more often over the age of 50, these are all risk factors for sleep apnea. When people have sleep apnea, there are cardiovascular risks. If you have sleep apnea, you have a higher risk of strokes and heart disease. So it's very important that we address this factor as well. Because you have MS, it doesn't prevent you from having strokes and heart disease, especially in older MS patients. You know what? We'll do all the questions. You're first when we're done. We'll go over all the questions. So now the next item I wanted to mention was pain with MS. And some people around, I probably had MS when I'm looking around for more than 20 years. And those are the days when people said, well, MS doesn't cause pain. Of course, that's totally incorrect. And there's many different kinds of pain you can have in MS. This shows some of the pain you could have. First, you could have musculoskeletal pain, muscle stiffness, spasticity, muscle spasms. And then because the muscles are not working properly and someone's not working properly, they might have joint problems. If you don't walk properly, your knees could be affected, your ankles could be affected. And of course, you could have headaches as well. These are musculoskeletal types of pain. And so this is another acronym that the MS Association magazine Motivator showed up with. And it's how do you evaluate pain? If you have pain, we're going to ask you these questions. When did it start? How acute is the pain? Where is it? How long has it been there? What does it feel like? Is it a burning pain? Is it a stabbing pain? Is it a tingling pain? Is it a dull pain? What kind of pain is it? What makes it better? What makes it worse? And what treatments have you been on? That may help us determine what kind of pain is it. Is it a nerve pain? Is it a muscle pain? What kind of pain do you have? This again over here is talking about the types of pain, musculoskeletal pain or neuropathic pain, which is pain that is due to the nerves themselves that are involved. And then we can also think of pain in other ways, and this applies to all pain, not only MS pain. Is the pain acute? Is it just starting within the last few days or recent? Or has it been there a long time? Chronic pain? Or is it paroxysmal pain? That's very common in MS. That's pain that comes and goes. Here's a great example of paroxysmal pain is trigeminal neuralgia. I bet there's at least some people here that have had trigeminal neuralgia, which is facial pain. It's sharp, it's severe, it comes and it goes. So there are different kinds of pain that could be experienced with MS, and we treat them differently. The neuropathic pain can be burning or tingling. It's a burning, tingling kind of pain, or electrical. What's a classical neuropathic type of pain? Who knows what Lhermitte's syndrome is? Do I have a Lhermitte's? No takers for Lhermitte's syndrome? Lhermitte's? Yes, there you go. That's the answer. It's when you bend your head down, you feel an electrical sensation. It's like hitting a funny bone, but it's when you bend your head down. That's an example of an electrical kind of pain. And it can come and go, and your skin can be sensitive. Trigeminal neuralgia, I told you about. There is Lhermitte's sign over there, and then the MS hug. And you all know what the MS hug is. It's a hug. It feels like you're being hugged. And it can be on one side or both sides or all the way around. These are all pain syndromes of MS. How do we treat this? The commonest two medications we use for MS pain are anti-seizure medications. You can see them up there, like gabapentin or Lyrica, or carbamazepine, which is known as Tegretol, or oxcarbazepine. These are all seizure medications. And sometimes for MS pain we use antidepressant medications. The oldest one is Elavil, amitriptyline. nortriptyline, Cymbalta is the newest one that we use. So these are all medications that we use to treat this nerve pain of MS. So there are treatments. The great majority of people will respond to those medications. And if you have muscle pain, we treat it the same way we would treat any other kind of muscle pain, treat spasticity. Sometimes we even use Botox, exercise, massage, all those things are crucial. And right at the bottom it says opioids, that's the last step. If someone has severe pain that is affecting the quality of their life and they don't respond to anything else, that's only when we might refer them for pain management. There is a section over here on cognitive function. That's the next section we'll touch on a little bit over here. Cognitive function in people with MS and young people with MS is a most disabling symptom. The commonest cause of a young person with MS becoming unemployed is cognitive problems, because you can't compensate for a cognitive problem. If you have trouble walking, you can compensate. You can get a cane, you can get a walker, you can even get a scooter, and you can still go to work. But if you can't think, if you can't process, if you can't multitask, you can't compensate for that. You can cover up for a while, but not. So these problems of memory, attention and concentration, information processing, all these problems can be very incapacitating. Executive functions, visuospatial functions, verbal fluency, all these problems are very important. So we can document these problems by doing neuropsychological testing. Along the way, well, not that important to do it necessarily. When it's very important to do that is if someone is becoming impaired because of their memory, and we're now looking to apply for disability. I don't know how long disability takes in this state. I hear this state is near bankruptcy. Is that true? Oh, yeah. Yeah. So how about if someone now is applying for disability and for assistance from counties and communities, and very difficult. So even in Florida, though, people can be delayed. If they get turned down for their Social Security application the first time, the next appearance in front of a judge or their appeal may take 6 to 18 months, forever. So it's very important when you're applying for disability, whatever it is, that everything is down. And this goes back earlier on to the communication tool. If you're thinking of disability, let your neurologist know about it. So it's documented. It must go in my note. In my note, it's going to say, I have spoken to Sam, and I think because of his cognitive problems and his fatigue and whatever, that he is totally disabled from gainful employment. It's in my note. As opposed to Sam doesn't even tell me about it. And 3 months later, I suddenly get a letter from Social Security and it says, we want your notes because Sam's applying for disability. And my last note says Sam is doing just fine. How do you think that goes down? Not very well. Now Sam, I guarantee he's going to be, the first time he applies, he will be rejected. Now he's got to go through the whole thing again. And he can try himself, which is going to just drag it on, or we can hire an attorney. You need to document things. You need to mention these things, and we need to write them down. And if cognitive problems are a big part of why someone is having trouble working, then we need to send you. We need to get that well studied and do neuropsychological testing. And you can see that cognitive problems are common in MS. It tells you here, different trials have said how many people, 40 to 65% of people have cognitive problems. And they don't always correlate. Somebody could look perfect on the surface. That's why I called it an invisible symptom. Someone's walking. They can run a marathon, but when they think, it's just not good. And the cognitive problems and the physical problems don't always correlate. And they can be seen very early on, these cognitive problems. How do you treat them? In general, same as any other principle of MS. Treat MS early. When we see people with MS, newly diagnosed, relapsing MS, we want to treat it early. If they have progressive MS, that's now when you get back to treating their symptoms actively, because we don't have any FDA-approved drug for primary progressive MS. Not yet. We're hoping it's coming, but we don't have it yet. What about symptomatic treatment? Is there any good drug for this? No, there's no good actual FDA-approved drug. We have tried for this Aricept. Aricept is used for Alzheimer's disease, and it's been tried for MS. Some trials said works a little bit. Some said it doesn't work. I can't say I've seen great benefit from Aricept. So all the other things that you do yourself are very important. Mental stimulation, organization, planning. So there are people who've written papers on organization in MS. And I ask my patients about this. Are you organized? How much disorganization do you have in your life? Papers just lying and stacked up. And what about clutter? There are people who've written about clutter. So you need to declutter. I guarantee if you've got papers all over the place and you took them through 3/4 of them out. No, 90% of them, you don't even need them. So you need to start. And I say start today with everything that comes in today. Start to declutter. Get the clutter and the disorganization out of your life. You guys know about this? Yeah. These things, your mind, and it gets worse and worse and worse. And it just accumulates, stacks and stacks and stacks of papers. So these things overload your brain. Your brain gets overloaded with these problems. And then there are strategies that can be taught to you with some rehab, cognitive rehab, about if you're doing one task. So what I do, the technique that I tell patients about, is what I call the linking or bridging task. I'll give you an example of this. That a patient said to me that his wife never completes anything. He says, she goes to do the laundry, then the phone rings, and 3 hours later she walks by the washing machine and there's still laundry in there. He says, that's what happens. I come home and there's laundry in the machine or the dryer or something. She never completes anything. He's frustrated. I said to her, you need to link. So guess what? What's a link? The best link over there. You're working with the laundry, the phone rings, you pick up the phone. I said, take a towel with you. So now when you're speaking on the phone, hold a towel in your hand. So when you're done with the phone, now you've got a towel. You say, oh, I was doing the laundry. That's a linking technique. So you can find any kind of linking technique you want. But take something to link you to the activity if you have to get back to it. If you don't have to get back to it, it doesn't matter. But if you want to get back to the activity, you can call it a linking or a bridging. I don't know, whatever name. I call it a linking, but have something that links you to the activity so it drives you back so you can remember what you were just doing. And then also have somewhere where you put everything in the same place. This probably applies to most people over here. You come home and put your keys down somewhere and your glasses down somewhere and something else somewhere else, and now 2 hours later you're looking for the keys. Where are they? I mean, that happens to everybody, to every single person. I was speaking on the phone to my wife and I said, I can't find my phone. That's the worst one I've ever done. I said, I can't find my phone. Oh. But, it could be glasses or keys or anything. Have a place where you put them. If you come in, I guess most of us or many of us come in through a kitchen or front door, you have a little basket there and everything. Just put it there routinely, your keys, your whatever, your phone, anything needs to go in there so you know where it is. So you don't have to ever struggle and waste 2 or 5 or half an hour of looking for something. Just put them in the same place. Organization, avoiding clutter, physical and mental exercise, all these things go toward helping you manage some of these symptoms. This is just a different way of saying about the invisible self. Do not, and these are quotes, this came from a book called The Power of Kindness by Piero Ferrucci. This is a great book, absolutely great book, that I look at even when I'm flying and have it on my iPad and look at this all the time. Some things that he wrote, I just put some quotes in. I mean, there's a whole book, 275 pages or whatever it is, of great quotes and about people helping and being kind, the power of kindness. Do not become another person, an unrecognizable version of yourself, less than what you are. Do not let other people define you. Define yourself. You're still the same person. And if other people look down on you or they don't want to, or they think you've changed, no, be yourself and continue being your good yourself. So don't let other people define you. Define yourself. And then there are those people who are special and they say, you know what, I like you as you are. I don't want you to change. You are different. You can't do the things before, but we'll find different things to do. And this is absolutely true. Many people will not be bothered to take the time to know you and will treat you as if you are invisible. How many patients tell me that they don't have the same friends they had anymore? People have drifted off. They've gone away there because you can't hang out together, whatever. So it's the true people and true friends and true human beings that will take the time to know you and say, it's all right. You've changed, but that's okay. Because you know what? If I change, maybe you'd still be with me and stick around with me. So these are respect is the key. Respect people. Seeing how often do you, and this is really, this one over here, respect, seeing, listen, you watch programs on TV. One person is speaking, before they've had half a second of saying something, somebody else is interrupting already. We have the master in our political stuff that's going on right now. Somebody can't speak, somebody's interrupting them. Let someone finish what they're saying. If someone's speaking, listen to them. Because you want them to listen to you. So the same as you want them to listen to you, you need to listen to them. That's why it says seeing and listening. Watch them. Listen to them. When they're finished, then you say what you want. If you totally can't agree, then that's maybe the end of that discussion. But it's very important, just like you want someone, you want to be heard. And so you need to listen as well. Seeing and listening. And there is this strategy that I read about. I don't know where it happens, but it's where people are speaking at a round table. And in the center of the table, there's some kind of, maybe a bell or a glass or some item that's clear to see. And the person speaking holds that in front of them. And the only person that can speak is the person that holds that in front of them. When they're finished speaking, they pass it to someone else. Then they speak. When they're finished, they pass it to someone else. So listen to people, respect people. If you want to be respected, then we have to have mutual respect. And these are problems in our society, aren't they? Respect and responsibility that are disappearing, that we have to work on. And when you have a chronic condition, it's so important to have respect and to have responsibility, because then hopefully you can demand that people do the same for you. This is just some mental health things we've spoken about these already. I'm not going to go over them, except at the bottom. Again, this goes back to that same book, that you always have a bucket list. We all have a bucket list of what to do. Isn't that our common bucket list? What I want to do. I want to climb Mount Everest or whatever. I want to do these things. But how bucket list of what not to do? Forgiveness, patience, generosity, respect, loyalty, gratitude. All these things are from that same book I spoke to you about all things that make us better human beings. I think if we're better within ourselves, then we can kind of demand the same from other people. So this is a summary of what we spoke about before, the things you do for yourself. That's kind of what we've been through in terms of mental health, interactions, support, the invisible symptoms. And then a little bit about nutrition. Stuart has asked me to say a lot to you today, and I've got a lot of time. Oftentimes I shared the platform with one other speaker today. Sometimes we have several people, so I don't get to say all these things. But here we go, talking about the importance of eating and the food. And this is some general things, some general principles, about to eat breakfast and not to skip meals. In terms of fat, that the very original MS diet was the Swank diet. And Dr. Swank, who lived to the age of 99, by the way, and by the way, practiced till he was 87. 87. So Dr. Swank said that people with MS should avoid saturated fats. But you need fat. There's no doubt we have to have fat in our diet. You can't have a diet without fat. And so you should concentrate and find good sources of unsaturated fats, which come from some vegetables and nut sources and things like that. And more fiber. Eat more plants in your diet, fluids, keep yourself adequately hydrated, supplements, vitamin D, vitamin B12. And then what I call over here defensive dining. This is defensive dining, that's correct, not defensive driving. So not only must you eat the right things, but eat the right amount of them, because you can eat the right food and eat too much of it as well, and have too many calories of the wrong thing. So watch your calorie control as well. And so I wrote over there, sharing portions. So my question is, who do you share with? Who can give me the answer to who do you share with? I'm waiting for the answer. Your spouse. No? Yourself. You share with yourself. So most portions that we get are too large. And so there's really too much. So what I say is the first thing you do is when they bring you a portion, that you should immediately ask them to bring you a box and divide your portion in half. Immediately. Don't even think about it. Unless you're at an expensive restaurant, right? If it's expensive, you probably haven't got enough food. But if you're at an average restaurant, and what are you going to do at an average restaurant? Take the stuff and divide it in half, and take half of it and put it in the box and put it aside. Now you've got another meal. And take what's on your plate and spread it out a bit. I guarantee you've got enough to eat there, especially if you eat slower. And when we eat too fast, the problem is that when you eat too fast, if you're hungry and you eat too fast, your brain doesn't know how much you've put in your stomach, and it doesn't shut down your appetite. But if you eat slower, the message starts to get to your brain that you've got food over there, and it will shut down your appetite, and you say, well, that's enough. And salad dressings, how many calories? You might think, well, I'm great. I had this healthy salad, but I put on this dressing, and it's got 5,000 calories. So watch the salad dressing on the side. And alcohol has got a lot of calories. Watch out for alcohol calories. And how about salt, sugar, and saturated fats, the bad S's? We spoke about saturated fat, salt. There's studies now that suggest that salt is not good for people with MS and probably some other diseases. So avoid salt. If you can cook without salt, cook without salt. Don't put salt on the table. If someone wants something else to flavor their food, use something. But use salt, low salt. If you have snacks and stuff, look for low salt, no salt, and sugar. And the sugar doesn't only apply to people with MS here, that applies to everybody. We know that sugar is a poison. But if you need some sweetener, we know that some of the sweeteners are not great either. All these artificial sweeteners are not great. But there is one artificial sweetener that is likely fine, and that is stevia or truvia. I think those are perfectly fine. So go and buy yourself some stevia or truvia, and if you have coffee or whatever you're needing to sweeten, put stevia or truvia and avoid other sugar and avoid the artificial sweeteners. This is from Joel Furman, who often speaks on PBS, and he said these are the plants. He called this combs, C-O-M-B-S, colored vegetables, onions, mushrooms, berries, and seeds. He says that if this is a large part of your diet, you're going to be very healthy. And he often speaks on PBS. Watch for him on PBS. Here I'm speaking about vitamin D a little bit. So vitamin D we know is very important for MS, and theories years ago used to be that that's why you see more MS up north than south, because people don't get enough sun, so they're vitamin D deficient. And who knew that really there was truth to that? Vitamin D deficiency has a direct correlation to how your MS is doing. They've studied that. There have been studies published where if people that have very low levels have more progression and do worse than people with higher levels. So make sure you've got enough vitamin D in your body. And the level we aim for is 75. So when you check your vitamin D level, don't let your physician just say it's enough. Especially primary care doctors might see a level of 45 and they say, you're doing great, your vitamin D is 45. No, we want it 75. We want 75. Salt I spoke to you about. Studies have shown correlation between that and MS progression. This is about plant-based fatty acids, so-called unsaturated fatty acids. And there were two studies actually that kind of contradicted each other a little bit. One study said that fatty acids from plants are the best, and another one said that fatty acids from fish are the best. So fatty acids, plant-based fatty acids seem to be good. And I think if you have fatty acids from fish, like cold water fish, I think if you have fatty acids in your diet, that is a good start for the fat that you need in your diet. This is the other study. So this study was in Australia. Found that fish was better than plants. So to go back over here, this study said plants are better than fish. This one says fish better than plants. I think they're both okay. Everything in moderation. Obesity. How about a risk factor? So now where we're getting to with MS is to say, can we predict who's going to get MS? And what do you think the answer to that is? Not exactly, but we can get ideas. So first thing about MS is we know there are genetic factors with MS. The rate of MS in the general population is about 0.1%. So about 1 person in 1,000 in the general population might have MS. But in family members, it's about 30 times higher. 30 times. 3%. So 0.1%, 3%. So the first thing you know is that I have a family history of MS, therefore I am at a higher risk. It doesn't mean I'm going to get it because it's still a low risk, but I have a family member, therefore I'm at some risk. So are there other risk factors that I can do to help prevent? Well, we just spoke about one, vitamin D. So low vitamin D could be a very important risk factor. Here's another one, obesity in young adulthood or adolescence, linked to the risk for MS. So obesity in young adults or adolescents, especially females, was associated with a higher risk of MS. So now you have two things you can tell your adolescent or young adult children about if you have a family history. Take vitamin D, watch your weight, eat healthy, and don't smoke. So now we have things we can do to try and be preventive about MS. And this is something that you're going to read more and more about. And this is the effect of the gastrointestinal tract. We eat food, it goes into our gastrointestinal tract. We have billions or trillions of bacteria that live in our gastrointestinal tract, doing all kinds of things. Some are good, some are bad. And so more and more you're going to read about this area we call the microbiome, the gastrointestinal tract. How important is what you eat? There's a direct relationship to how your immune system is working. And so perhaps by changing our diet, we change the stress in our immune system. And so there are things we need to look at in our diet, and there's some things that are healthier than others. And there's some, and so we're starting to get there now of talking to you about probiotics, about taking the right probiotics, the right kinds of probiotics. And more we're learning that these things actually are important in your diet, taking certain probiotics in the right amounts. So more and more you're going to read about the microbiome. I think this is going to become a very important thing in MS. And this extends now to what I was talking about before, how important your diet is, because of this effect on the microbiome, the gastrointestinal tract. And there was a study presented at one of the major MS meetings by Dr. Howard Weiner, who is a major MS research physician in Boston. And he said how we eat, what we eat, the kind of food we eat has a major effect on influencing our immune system. Because a large part of the immune system is in your gut. Think about how long the gastrointestinal tract is. There's a large part of the immune system there. And there's different kinds of bacteria. They've studied people with MS and people that don't have MS, and they see different bacteria. So there are bugs that produce inflammation, and there are bugs that reduce inflammation. And so maybe by controlling our diet, we will be able to modify our MS in the future. And guess what we do in the society of ours is we have overused antibiotics. If someone sneezes twice, here's an antibiotic for you. And most of these are viral infections. And sometimes I guess some of the stuff we get from some of the food we eat maybe has been treated with antibiotics. And all this stuff has completely changed our gastrointestinal tract and our biome. So we need to be looking at these things. And you'll see more and more of this in the future. It'll be a whole separate discussion. Here's some references I just put up for you. I spoke to you about the swank diet. The Blue Zone is a great book. That was a book that somebody wrote, commissioned by National Geographic, and he went around to 4 areas of the world and looked about why people in those 4 areas lived a long time and made some comments about it. And most of these people had vegetarian diets, although that wasn't always the case. Sometimes they were vegetarian because they couldn't afford to eat meat, and they might eat it once a month. Some of them were Seventh-day Adventists in Loma Linda. There was one group. They had a different reason for it. Some of them were shepherds in Italy, in Sardinia, and there are different reasons for why these people ate predominantly a vegetable, plant-based diet. Sometimes just simply what they could afford. And also the fact that they exercised was the second thing that was important. They exercised. So these were people that were living a long time. And guess what? They were men. The men were outliving the women, which is completely different from our society. And they were eating this diet with a lot of vegetables and plants. And they were exercising, not because they went to exercise, they went to LA Fitness 5 days a week, because they walked. They didn't take a bus or things like that. They walked everywhere. And the third thing was that these elderly people in this society, old people over the age of 90, that is some of them that he's interviewed, had a sense of purpose. And I want everybody needs to find that. Because you have MS, it doesn't mean that there's no further purpose to your life. Find it. Find the people who make you feel that you have a sense of purpose, whatever it is. Hobbies, interests, being in volunteer groups, supporting. Most people can find some sense of things that you can look forward to do. And then the China study was another study, as the name says, done largely in China, looking at people in certain areas living well. There's different indexes you can look at on the internet, the Nutritional Quality Index, the Nutrition Alert Health Letter, talks a lot about healthy diets. David Perlmutter wrote these 2 books, Grain Brain and Brain Maker. There's a lot of different nutritional references that you can look at. I think it's kind of winding down. I heard earlier you heard a lot of important information about exercise, so I'll just go through these slides quickly. My take on it, physical and mental. These are the standard exercises I always recommend. Balance, endurance, stretching, and strengthening. And I stress at the bottom there, in order for exercise to work, it must be something you want to do. If exercise is a chore or a pain or whatever, you won't do it. So make sure you're in the right environment. Dress cool. Keep yourself cool. Cool beverages, spray misting bottles. Exercise to work, you must be motivated. It must be easily available, affordable, convenient, enjoyable, just some general terms. Smoking and MS we've spoken about. The smoking is related to worsening of MS. And so this is kind of the final one, what I call the pillars of what you do for yourself in MS, which is to take vitamin D, pay attention to your diet, which means salt, sugar, saturated fats, no smoking, exercise, support in, support out. So having people support you, working with them, interactions, and at the same time, respect and responsibility between all people. I think that all helps everybody. And well, that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Way to go. Way to go. That's what you're supposed to do, right? So who's got questions? I would assume we're going to have several. I'm going to go around the room, everybody. I'm going to get around. Just raise your hand. Even if I'm over here, raise your hand. Let me acknowledge you, and then I'll know to get back, okay? And I'm going to hold the mic so that way I can put it in front of your mouth.
I was just wondering how much vitamin D you recommend to take a week.
Microphone.
Here's the key. You need to get your vitamin D level checked. Can I wander around, or I still have to stay over here? I still have to stay over here. I'm in jail. Vitamin D, so you have to get your level checked. And once you get your level checked, I can tell you how much to take. So some people will check their level, they only need to take 1,000 or 2,000 a day. Some people take 10,000 or 12,000 a day. So the very easy answer is check your vitamin D level. Once I know your level, I can tell you how much to take. So get the level checked. And get the B12 level checked as well. B12 is not specifically something for MS, but it's for the nervous system in general and for other things that it's very important. So if you have a disease like MS, a neurological disease, check your B12 level as well. So make sure both of those are good. But you measure the levels, then we can tell you how much to take.
Question here?
Can you tell us a little bit about the new drug that was released last Friday or a week ago Friday? Just about where it fits in the scheme of the other medications that are out there?
So about 10 days ago, a new drug was released. It's a drug that is going to be distributed by Biogen and AbbVie Pharmaceuticals. You saw that up there. It's called Decluzumab or Zimbrida. The FDA specifically said that this drug is generally recommended when you have failed 2 other medications. So right there, that's telling you something about it. Now, as time goes by, physicians might use it differently. Some might use it earlier, some might use it later. But generally, if the FDA says something like that, that tells you that maybe it's a drug that may be used for MS that's had more problems, but at the same time, it tells you that there's some issues with it, such as safety issues and monitoring issues. So what we know about this drug is that when it comes out, we are going to be required to watch and monitor the liver tests on a regular basis. And we're going to watch for other things like skin rashes. Where exactly it fits in, I can't tell you yet. The drug's not available till August. We'll start to use it. It is a drug that is very convenient. It's going to be once a month. And we're going to have to decide where it fits in. Is it people that have failed 2 other drugs? That's what the FDA is saying right now. You have failed 2 other drugs. You're still having active disease. Then this is a drug you'd consider at the same time as you consider the other options. And so someone's going to have to look at this and say, I looked at this, but the safety issues bother me. Or I looked at this and they don't look that bad. I can take this because it's convenient. There's going to be all these different things to look at. So where does it fit in right now? Everybody's going to be different in their practice, and I'm going to say to you that it's going to be generally where someone has failed 2 other drugs.
Is it in a category with any of the others? Is it similar to any of the others?
Repeat
Well,
that.
in terms of what it is, if you look at the name of it, it's called Decluzumab. Remember that magical word at the end, M-A-B? So like Tysabri, Natalizumab, or Lemtrada, Alemtuzumab. Anytime you see a drug that ends with the words M-A-B, those are called monoclonal antibodies. So they are manufactured, and they're antibodies that attack a specific part of a cell. So this drug works on a specific part of a cell, of a lymphocyte. It attaches to a specific part of a lymphocyte, which is where its actions come through that. And all these different monoclonal antibodies, Tysabri works differently from Decluzumab, works differently from Lemtrada, they're all different. But they're all this family of drugs called monoclonal antibodies. It's different from anything else we've had. It's completely different mechanism of action, which means if you've tried other drugs and you want to try this now, this is not the same as trying something that we've had before. It's completely different mechanism of action.
That way first, and then I'll be back here.
Getting back to diet for a moment, I've heard a lot of discussion about the paleo diet. How does that compare or fit in with the recommendations you're making?
I recommend a diet that's very heavy on fruits and vegetables and plants. So if you have a paleo diet and it's the vegetarian type of paleo diet, I would definitely strongly support that. If it's not, and you do consume some animals occasionally, red meat and things, I would say I would stress to do them in moderation. So I think any diet you do should be in moderation, and I would say if you do some red meats, just do it very moderately. Other than that, the vegetarian part of that I think is good. There are many diets. Probably some of you know the Dr. Wall's diet, and I like the vegetarian part of her diet personally. So when I tell you stuff about diet, that's my intake on it. If Dr. Walls was standing up here, she'd say, I'm not right in the head, but she'd say something like that, and she'd say her diet's a little different, and she, for example, in her diet talks about eating some organ meats and things like that I don't recommend. So we have different recommendations. There's no absolute proof of what the best diet is. I think a diet that's high in plants and vegetables, to me, and low in saturated fats and low in salt and low in sugar, those are the keys of it, and to take the vitamin D and the B12. That's what I would summarize as most important.
We've all heard for years and years and years about stem cells, and somebody sent us an article the other day having to do with a study from Canada that looked somewhat promising. I wonder if you would comment on that.
Well, let me first clarify what stem cells do for you. There's two things that stem cells could potentially do. The first thing is that we know people with MS have a disordered immune system. MS is a disease of the immune system. And the disordered immune system goes wrong and attacks your brain, your myelin, your brain, your spinal cord, your optic nerves. So the problem with MS is the immune system. So the first type of stem cell treatment, which is the one you read about and the one that's currently going on, is where you have stem cells that the purpose of using them is to help your immune system. How does that happen? So just to talk about the program from Canada, for example, they give people chemotherapy, heavy doses of chemotherapy, and it wipes out their bone marrow. The bone marrow is what's malfunctioning. Your immune system comes, all these cells are produced from the bone marrow, they're malfunctioning. You give people chemotherapy and you wipe out the bone marrow. It's wiped out. You have to restore it, you have to rescue it. So that's where the stem cells come in. The stem cells that you've taken from these same people, you've treated them, now you inject them back in, and they rescue your bone marrow, so you have some bone marrow, so you don't die from infections and things like that until you recover. So first type of stem cell that you're reading about now that they did is rescue stem cells. It's that the bone marrow is wiped out completely, and you rescue the bone marrow with stem cells, the same as you do for leukemia or cancer and things like that. That is the current stem cells that seem to be most effective right now. In that study, if you look at it, there were excuse me, there were 24 patients. One patient died. Now that's 1 out of 24. That's 4%. I think if you had a new drug for MS and you said 4% of people died, I don't know that you would use it. If I said to you that there's a new drug, any new drug, drug X, and 1 person out of every 24 that takes this drug dies, I don't know if you would use that drug. So stem cells are not quite ready for prime time, but they're very promising. A lot of these people, just as you said, a lot of the people with the stem cell stuff did very well. And right here in Chicago, that's probably the most famous place for stem cell work in MS. Dr. Richard Burt at Northwestern. That's probably the most well-known place for doing stem cells with MS. So that's the one kind of stem cell. Other people are doing other kinds of stem cells where they're actually injecting them into the spinal fluid. And maybe that's going to all have some benefit. All of it really is several years away from being prime time. And then going forward into the future, maybe we're going to have stem cells that actually are going to grow and replace the damaged tissues, the damaged myelin and things going forward. But we're not near that, because when you inject stem cells, how do they know where to go? We need to be able to tell them where to go. If you just inject stem cells, they don't know how to go to myelin, they could go to anywhere. As we age, all our organs are aging, they could go to the skin or the heart or anywhere. So that's the future. So stem cells right now are to repair the immune system, and they rescue stem cells. In the future, we'll have stem cells, hopefully, that are going to be stem cells that maybe help us repair the MS, but that's way down the road. I can't say when that's coming.
A quick comment and a question. The comment is that this is probably the most all-encompassing presentation on the treatment of MS that I've ever heard, so thank you for that. I mean, things like laughter and getting rid of clutter in your life, that's really important. And the question is, I detect a slight accent. What is it?
Well, I was born and raised in Chicago. No, I'm South African originally.
Here, then there, then there, then there.
That was an easy question. Easiest one I had to answer.
So I have MS and I have 4 nieces. How much vitamin D would you recommend just to help them not get MS? I mean...
Well, that's one of the risk factors. There's other risk factors.
No, I know, but if
they're
you're
going to take care of all the risk factors. But
if
at
you're
least
do something that,
at least,
and do
so
that.
again, I want to know what their level is. So I would say their level needs to be in that range, in the range of 75. I want a level of somewhere between 60 and 80.
So
that's the level I'm looking for.
Okay.
And so nobody knows exactly what it should be in an offspring. We tell people 75. But I'm saying if you get to a good range, have a good level of vitamin D.
Okay.
You know, not 30 or 35. Have a good level, 65. Have a good range of vitamin D.
Okay.
There's one other risk factor we didn't speak about because we can do nothing about it. And that is we know that MS is probably often triggered by viruses. And the commonest known virus that we know for sure is mono. But you can't prevent that. If you get mono, you get mono. But mono may be one of the triggers that could potentially trigger MS.
You mentioned earlier if you tried a drug and it failed, how do you know that it's a failure, first of all? And then how long, say you start a new drug, how long should you give it before you start seeing results? Or does it depend on the treatment and the drug itself?
So if you remember that one slide that had all those things in a round circle, remember it had a whole bunch of things? That's the way you evaluate if your medication is working. So the most obvious thing is it working? Am I having relapses? That's the most obvious thing. So if you're having more relapses, you're having a problem. Or if you're progressing. So you might not have a relapse, but you come in to see the neurologist and he says, your walking is worse today, it's slower. Or you're weaker. or your MRI scan might show a lot of new lesions. So the three ways we can tell if your drug is working for you are relapses, your examination, your disability, and the MRI scan. That's called efficacy. Efficacy means effectiveness. How effective is your medication for you? So the most obvious reason for you having to switch a drug would be effectiveness. Lack of effectiveness. Relapses, disability progression, MRI changes. So lack of effectiveness is the most obvious way when you want to switch a drug. Number two, it could be a safety issue. You could be taking a drug and saying, since I started this drug, I have severe depression. Or since I started this drug, my liver enzymes are elevated, it's not safe for me, or something else is happening with this drug. I've got vision problems from this drug. So it could be safety. And the third thing is it could be tolerability. And this goes back to some of the older drugs. You take injections, you have injection site reactions, and your skin is tender, you've got nowhere else to inject. So tolerability. So these are the three most obvious reasons why you switch. There are some reasons that are nasty reasons, such as your insurance company says we changed your formulary or something. We have to fight those. But the three main reasons why you switch a drug are safety, efficacy, and tolerability. And I think efficacy has the biggest component of that. Now, how long do you wait? If you start a new drug, you must wait at least, generally at least 6 months, unless disease is very aggressive. You need to give a drug at least 6 months. Typically at about the 6-month mark, we will look at the scans and look at you and see how the drug is doing. So we wait generally at least 6 months. We can switch sooner than we used to switch now, because years ago we didn't have all these 15 agents to choose from. Now we have a bunch of stuff to choose from, so we might be inclined to change sooner if we see changes and you're not doing as well as we hope you are.
Hi, I've heard about Lemtrada. I don't know a lot about it. Could you explain it a little bit for me?
So Lemtrada has been on the market now about 1.5 years. When it was originally approved, just like the drug we first spoke about, the FDA said this drug should generally be used for people that have failed 2 other medications. Again, it is an excellent medication in the right patient. So anybody whose MS seems to be more active, so if they fail 2 drugs, to me it would be a go-to drug. If they haven't failed 2 drugs, if they failed 1 drug, well, they could be newly diagnosed in the right patient, because they said generally approved, but in somebody who has very active disease, this is a medication in the higher tier of medication. So we spoke before about where do we put this new drug. So I would put Lemtrada and Tysabri as the drugs that are used, because what do we have when we have drugs like this? They're much more active, they're for much more aggressive disease, but what comes with drugs like this that are more active and have more benefits is potentially higher risk and higher side effects. So I want you always, when you think of this equation, to think of 2 things. The risk of the drug versus the benefit of the drug. Risk and benefit. But we think about for everything. The risk of the drug and the benefit of the drug. But at the same time, you need to think of the risk of the drug and the risk of your MS. If I don't treat my MS actively, where am I going to be in a year? Because look where I've gone in the last year. I've already not done well. I need something more active. So this is a double equation. In the middle of the equation, benefit. On the one side, risk of the MS, on the other side, risk of the drug. So we put all these into play and then look at this drug. So Lemtrada has been in the market 1.5 years, and I think it's an excellent drug. It does have some side effects, infections, autoimmune diseases, some others that we need to look at, but I would consider it for someone with aggressive disease to be an excellent choice.
I have 2 questions. The first one is about medical marijuana. What do you think it might be beneficial for, and what might it not, and what would be the ramifications of using it were it legal? Second question is about the Antilingo 1 study. Can you address what happened with Biogen and how it did not meet the endpoints?
So the first question is about marijuana, which I'm not sure about this state. Is it legal? Yes. It is? Yes. I need to go shopping. Now, in the state of Florida, medical marijuana is not legal yet. And so we know with marijuana that there are certainly 2 definite symptoms of MS that have benefited from it. The one is pain and the other is spasticity. So if someone has pain or someone has spasticity, then I think medical marijuana is going to have a place for them. The side effect from it is impairing cognitive function. And there are several publications that have suggested that people who take it on a regular basis have impaired cognitive function, which is already maybe a problem in some people. So I think that we're going to learn as we use more of it, as it becomes more available, how to use it. For example, maybe if people have a lot of spasticity, they could take it at night to help them sleep through the night. But if they're taking it all day, I don't know that that's going to, I think the benefits there might be outweighed by the risks. So again, it's something we're learning. Plus there's going to be, as time goes forward and it's approved, we're going to have marijuana derivatives. Cannabis derivatives, they call them cannabinoids, that maybe won't make people high, but will have effects on spasticity and other things without having the bad side effects. So there is definitely some future for this going forward. Now, as the other issue that Jill raised is the question of anti-lingo. So there was a medication that's been in clinical trials, and it was a medication that was supposed to help remyelination, that we know with MS that when the inflammation attacks the nerve cells, the myelin is damaged, and this was a medication that was hopefully going to help the myelin regenerate, which we call remyelination. So after demyelination comes remyelination. The drug was called anti-lingo, and in the clinical trial that they just published, it failed to meet its end point. So it failed to cause enough regeneration of myelin to make any difference. So at this stage, unfortunately, it's a failed study.
Question here.
One is my vitamin D is between 39 and 41. Once 1 year ago it hit 33, but most of the years it's been 39 to 41.
Well,
how much D do I take?
No, it's far too low. So if I had a 39 to 41, I'm saying to you, I want it to be 65 to 80 in that range. So I would double. Whatever you're taking, I would double. Because I want to almost double. You're 39, I want you 75, 78. So I would double what you're taking. And if you're taking 5,000, I'd say take 10,000. 1,000? You need, well, that's not much. But I mean, double it up, just double. Just 2,000 might be enough for you. But there are many people that take 5,000 or 10,000 a day. So double it up and check it in a few months.
Over here, please.
Yes, first of all, thank you, Dr. Steingo, for your coming here. And thank you again for this wonderful, wonderful Land of MS Help Me Navigate checklist.
Thank you.
It seems very, very complete. I was wondering if you could talk a tiny bit about I'm messing on the word here. Under musculoskeletal, you have listed fibromyalgia. Can you talk about the connection between fibromyalgia and MS, please? Thank you.
Right. Well, fibromyalgia is a very, as you know, misunderstood and kind of unclaimed disease. I mean, who treats it if you get it? Does the rheumatologist treat it? Does the neurologist? I think it's unclaimed. And the problem with fibromyalgia, to my mind, is because fibromyalgia now stands where MS stood many years ago. There's no way of diagnosing fibromyalgia. I think half the physicians out there think fibromyalgia is psychological. And the other half say, well, maybe it's true, but we don't have much to treat it with. So there are criteria of finding trigger points and things like that. But the problem with fibromyalgia is very hard to diagnose. And so the symptoms of fibromyalgia are often non-specific. So it's more common in females. Well, MS is also more common in females. So you have women who have non-specific symptoms. So you have a woman who's 35 years old who has pain and aches and maybe some depression and tingling, and somebody's going to say, well, this is psychological. It's where MS used to be. We don't have good diagnostic tests. There does not seem to be a direct relationship. Some people have suggested, some studies, maybe there's a little more fibromyalgia seen in MS, but I don't think that's the case. I think it could be only because they're both diseases that are more common in women. Just like migraine is more common in women, so you see more migraine in MS patients because there's more women. So I think there's overlap between them, but I don't think there's a direct relationship between them. And the treatment of fibromyalgia is standard treatment. It's because it causes musculoskeletal, a lot of pain. So it's the same medications we talked about before, those same musculoskeletal or neuropathic medications, Lyrica and Cymbalta, the same seizure medications and antidepressants, all the same kind of stuff.
Cholesterol. I may have my numbers wrong, but the concept is correct. The brain has 5% of the body's weight, but uses 25% of the cholesterol. It's extremely important for brain health, and probably half the people or more in this room are taking cholesterol-lowering drugs. Many of the diets that are recommended also low cholesterol. Can you comment?
Yeah, I mean, so the answer to that is we don't fully understand cholesterol, but I think your point is absolutely correct. Very, very important for us to understand it better. Because the brain, myelin, is made up of lipids, of fatty tissue. And so that's why I stressed when I say to people, have a low saturated fat diet, but don't leave fat out the diet. You need to have unsaturated fats in the diet. So now to go to what you're saying, for example, let's look at one thing. They actually did a study with statins for progressive MS, and it seemed to slow the progression of MS down. And the dose that they used was huge, 80 milligrams a day of statin, and it seemed to slow the progression, which would make no sense. Based on what you're saying, there is a lot of cholesterol in the lipids in the brain, so we don't therefore understand the interactions. But in addition to that, there's now a lot of cardiologists and other physicians saying Lower your cholesterol, get it very low. So some recent studies have suggested maybe that's not correct. For example, it seems like with Alzheimer's disease that people that have Alzheimer's disease more commonly have low cholesterol than high cholesterol. And there's some of this evidence that, so I think that what we've done with this is the pendulum's gone too far, and that our cholesterol doesn't have to be quite as low as we say it should be, and we should just eat high quality fats. But I think this is a very, very important ongoing topic. And I'd say if you need, so I don't ever give anyone a statin for their MS, but I say if you need a statin because your cholesterol is way high, you need to bring it down because it will have cardiovascular effects. But if it's not way down, if someone's got a cholesterol in my eyes around 200, I'm not going to get anxious around 200 like I see with some patients and their cardiologists that want it way under 100 and a lower LDL, because some stuff I'm reading is suggesting other problems of low cholesterol. So I think in the future, just like we spoke about the microbiome and the food that you put into your gastrointestinal tract, that we're learning more about that. These things we're talking about now, when we're sitting up here talking in 10 years' time, we will be talking more about the microbiome and about cholesterol. Very important topic that we don't fully understand, but good points.
When it comes to using cannabinoids that marijuana gives you, I would imagine that people who take the medication then have soporific or somatic effect of it. So their driving, their ability to drive might be hampered. Their ability to work with equipment might be hampered too.
No, I mean, right now, if you go with marijuana on the street, I mean, the side effects are serious. And so that's why I'm thinking going forward, we need to develop some cannabinoids, some derivatives that don't have all these kind of side effects.
In Israel, they were trying to take and pass a medication out into the marketplace, and they have throughout the world, but it doesn't have the how would you say it, the soporific effects.
Right.
It was specifically convulsions.
Yeah, so so medication in Florida, they have approved some forms of cannabinoids, Charlotte's Web, and there's things like this for patients with certain kinds of seizures where the derivative, the cannabinoid, is life-saving. But those don't work as effectively for MS. There's some other, I mean, there's many cannabinoids, so there's different derivatives.
Sleep apnea. About 15 years ago, I took a sleep test, very intensive as part of a study. They had found nothing wrong. They wound up saying it must be from MS, of which very little study's been doing now. I just recently had a sleep test. They said I had sleep apnea. Towards the end of their 5 hours, they let me sleep, not earlier, but that I had sleep apnea. Some reasons you gave, you said it's a part of MS, but the reasons you gave for sleep apnea were the standard ones for anybody. Being overweight, being a man, and all those, and I'm none of those.
I mean, looking at you, I would say you're not a classical sleep apnea kind of candidate. But yes, people with MS can get some sleep disturbances outside of those classical things. It can happen. I mean, and we don't know exactly where would the lesion be. There's spots in the brain that are probably in a part of the brain that controls sleep. So we do see a lot of sleep disturbance in MS. Most of it we can explain with a lot of the other things I showed you that can interfere with sleep. And some of it's sleep apnea, and then there's just some primary sleep disturbances that can occur with MS. So you're in that group?
But what about the apnea? Is that something I'm supposed to be treating at this point when I'm not really any of those? Or is it just, you said it can be MS, so it's not standard?
If you had tests and the test confirmed, if you had a sleep study and the end of the study says you have sleep apnea, you need to treat it, because although you don't have all the other risk factors on the surface anyway, most of those people have other risk factors. So remember, people have hypertension, they're overweight.
I don't have any of those.
No, you don't. But especially in those patients, there's higher risk for things like stroke, and so I would still treat the sleep apnea.
But you see it more common in MS?
Not more common, but yes, common. It's common though. I wouldn't say it's more common, but it's common.
This side of the room?
Most of the people with MS that have it have this risk factors as well. But you can see it, just like you're pointing out, you can see it in some people that don't have those risk factors, and it's just primarily from their MS. That can happen.
Yeah. Next question's over here, please.
I've just heard recently of a treatment for MS where they transfer the, I don't know what you call it, the gut contents from one healthy patient to that of an MS patient, and it benefits the MS patient. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, so the question is, you transfer gut contents. Let's say what it is. It's a fecal transplant. So they're taking out feces and they're processing them. Sometimes they even have fecal pellets that they make or different formulations, and then give them to someone else. That's because of what we spoke about with the microbiome, all the bacteria. So over many years of eating the wrong diet and having too many antibiotics, some people are full of it and they're wrong it. And so their microbiome, their bacteria are incorrect. They maybe have bacteria that are pro-inflammatory and lead to inflammation instead of having bacteria that are anti-inflammatory. So if you take fecal contents from a healthy person that has the right bacteria and transplant them in, the growth would be, hopefully the new bacteria will take over and their microbiome, their gastrointestinal tract will be reformulated with the new bacteria, and they will be much healthier after that. So that's one way of doing it. And that is a way that certainly people are writing about that. I quoted the book of who writes a lot about that is Dr. Perlmutter in that book called Brain Maker. He wrote a lot, he talks quite a bit about the fecal transplant. But yes, certainly there are people doing that. And the other way of doing it is to eat healthy and probiotics. Take some probiotics in your diet. And don't take antibiotics if you don't need them. If you sneeze twice, you don't need an antibiotic. Most infections are viral, and we take too many antibiotics.
Any other questions? Good. Hold on a minute. Wait. You got to wait. Okay. Hold your breath. Count to 10.
I can repeat.
Too late. You didn't repeat them before.
What's your experience with using colloidal silver, if at all, for antibacterial activity? Yes.
None. So the question is, no, you're the question. No, I have no experience with using that.
All right. Any other questions? Great. So I have one for you all. Oh, my gosh. Here we go again. Poor Jill.
How close are we to finding a biomarker for MS in terms of what medication will be the best for a particular patient?
So a biomarker is going to be something that's going to enable us to tell us if a particular drug is going to work for a particular person, or if the drug has been effective. And so some have been found. For example, they've done some studies with Copaxone, and they said that certain people that have certain genetic traits will respond better to this drug than the other. So I think going forward, the most likely biomarker is going to be, so we're looking at people's gene patterns, what we call the genome, which is to look at all the genes in your body and saying that we all have different gene types. And with MS, the problem with MS is there isn't just one gene, abnormal gene that causes MS. There's probably multiple ones. And so we're trying to identify a pattern. That if we look at someone's pattern of genes, we might be able to predict which particular drug they might be more responsive to or not. And then there's other biomarkers. There could be biomarkers in the blood or biomarkers in the spinal fluid. The answer to your question is no. There's nothing now that's been proved. Somebody writes up something, they say maybe this looks effective. Right now, I would say we don't have anything exactly at this point that's going to help us. So there's nothing I can absolutely reliably use. We have some markers. We have MRI scans and other things. But for biomarkers, I say right now we don't have anything.
Any other questions? 2. You want to see more exercise here.
I heard in the news that the Zika virus was a trigger for MS now. Have you heard anything about that?
I mean, it wouldn't be surprising. So, anything that triggers off your immune system can trigger off MS or other autoimmune diseases. So we know the Zika virus has been associated with some neurological diseases, including encephalopathy and including Guillain-Barré syndrome, which is also a condition that affects the spinal cord. So Zika virus has caused some other conditions. So it wouldn't be surprising for it to trigger off MS. I have not read about that, but I wouldn't be surprised about it. Yeah.
I heard on the radio, actually on the way here, about the study of mice where exercise is replenishing, that's not the word I want to use, regenerating neuron. Have you heard of anything more on the human aspect of that?
No, I only to say that we know that constantly you read about the importance of exercise, and I told you before that exercise not only has good physical benefits on you, but exercise also has good benefits for memory. So when they've studied people who exercise regularly, they have better mental outcomes. So there's clearly other things happening besides just doing the physical exercise. So when you're improving your cardiovascular dynamics, you're improving a lot of things by exercising. So I'm not familiar with that exact study, but there's no doubt, I think the study simply highlights that maybe still in the lab animal that we're seeing some benefit of exercise, and we know in humans in clinical studies that exercise has great benefit, so it just adds to our body of knowledge that exercise is very important.
Okay, any other questions? Great. Dr. Steingo, thank you. Thanks for coming here today. I have a question for all of you. Is this the type of program that you would like to see more often of in the area? Great. So now we know. So I hope you write that down so I can remember it, all right? Also, we ask that you all remember to turn in those seminar evaluations that I just asked you to write that down on. And if there's any other type of program that you would like to see us possibly do in the future, we will consider it if we have more than 4% of you asking for it. Okay? And again, though, I want to thank you all for coming here today. This was an MS Views and News program. We are unlike any of the other or patient advocacy organizations because we're providing all the time patient information, education, and resources. We hope that you all remember us, tell your friends, tell them what they missed by not coming to this today, and maybe the next time we're in Chicago, we'll see a larger room with more people. And thank you again for coming. Have a great day.